It was a moonless night, the kind where darkness swallowed the earth whole. Jack Turner, a skeptic to the core, drove along the winding road toward the infamous Grayvale Bridge. Locals whispered it was cursed, haunted by a spirit who lured the unsuspecting to their doom. Jack dismissed it as folklore, mere tales meant to frighten the gullible. The bridge emerged from the mist like a phantom, its rusted iron beams creaking under the weight of the wind. As his headlights pierced the fog, Jack slowed his car. The GPS stuttered, then froze. His phone's signal bar vanished. Only the unsettling hum of his engine and the rhythmic tapping of rain against his windshield broke the silence. Jack scoffed. "Ghosts," he muttered under his breath, gripping the wheel tighter. Midway across the bridge, he saw her, a woman drenched from head to toe, standing motionless on the roadside. Her long, dark hair clung to her face, and her pale hands cradled something small and limp. A child, perhaps? His instincts screamed to drive on, but guilt clawed at his mind. He rolled down the window, the scent of damp metal and decay flooding the car. "Hey, are you okay?" The woman didn't move, her head tilted ever so slightly toward him, revealing hollow eyes that seemed to drink in the darkness. Jack's stomach tightened. "Need a ride?" he offered hesitantly. She nodded, slow, deliberate, and climbed into the back seat, her soaked dress dripping onto the upholstery. Jack swallowed hard, trying to focus on the road. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice trembling. She didn't respond. Instead, she began humming, a soft, eerie lullaby that clawed at the edges of his sanity. The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing second. Jack's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. Glancing in the rearview mirror, he noticed something horrifying. The bundle in her arms, a baby he had thought wasn't a baby at all. It was a doll, its glassy eyes cracked, its mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. His heart raced. Where are you headed?" he stammered. She finally spoke, her voice a hollow echo. "Home." The word hung in the air like a noose tightening around his neck. Suddenly, the car's engine sputtered and died. The headlights flickered, plunging them into suffocating darkness. Jack's pulse thundered in his ears as he fumbled for his phone, but the screen remained black. "Stay here," he whispered, though he doubted she'd even heard. He stepped out, the cold night air biting at his skin. As he opened the hood, he heard the soft click of the car door. Panic surged through him. "Hey, stay inside," he barked, spinning around. She was standing behind him, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her lips curling into a smile that wasn't human. A blood-curdling scream erupted from her as her face twisted into something grotesque, her hollow eyes now pits of darkness, her mouth stretching impossibly wide. Jack stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. The bridge shook violently. The mist thickened, swirling around him like spectral hands. And then he heard it. A child's laughter, high-pitched and chilling, coming from all directions. Jack scrambled to his feet and ran toward the car, but the bridge seemed to stretch endlessly. The laughter grew louder, more menacing. His breath came in ragged gasps as shadows danced in the corners of his vision. When he finally reached the car, the woman was gone. The doll lay in the driver's seat, its head slowly turning to face him. And then he felt it, a cold hand on his shoulder. He whipped around, but no one was there. "Jack!" The whisper came from everywhere and nowhere at once. He turned back to the car, only to see his own reflection in the window, except it wasn't him. The face staring back had hollow eyes and a twisted grin. A scream clawed its way out of his throat as the bridge collapsed beneath him, plunging him into the icy abyss below. They found his car the next morning, teetering on the edge of the broken bridge. Of Jack Turner, there was no sign, except for a doll sitting upright in the driver's seat, its cracked eyes staring straight ahead. And if you listen closely on a moonless night, some say you can still hear a soft lullaby echoing through the fog. It was the dead of night when Lucy found herself walking down the desolate forest path. The air was dense, suffocating, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The crunch of leaves beneath her boots echoed unnaturally loud in the silence. while the occasional hoot of an unseen owl sent shivers racing down her spine. Lucy hated driving through the countryside, but tonight was unavoidable. Her car had sputtered its last breath a few miles back, leaving her stranded in the heart of nowhere. A flickering flashlight was her only companion as she trudged through the eerie expanse, desperate to find a house or a phone signal. And that's when she saw them, two pinpricks of light glowing in the darkness ahead. She froze mid-step. They hovered at eye level, unmoving, watching. Probably an animal, she whispered to herself, though her voice trembled. The logical explanation barely soothed her racing heart. Slowly, she swung the flashlight toward the glow, illuminating the path ahead. Nothing. The eyes vanished, swallowed by the darkness as if they had never been there. Lucy let out a shaky breath and pressed on, her pace quickening. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. Her skin prickled with the sensation of unseen eyes boring into her back. Every few steps, she'd whirl around, her flashlight slicing through the shadows. Yet the forest revealed nothing but an endless sea of trees, until she saw them again. This time, the eyes were closer, far closer. They gleamed unnaturally bright, their gaze unblinking, predatory. The flashlight quivered in her hands as she raised it once more. The beam caught a glimpse of something. Fur, perhaps? Or was it flesh? The shape darted away before she could make sense of it. "Who's there?" she called, her voice echoing back to her. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the sound. A low, guttural growl, so deep it seemed to vibrate the very ground beneath her feet. Lucy's breath hitched as she began to run, her flashlight bouncing wildly with each step. The growl morphed into a snarl, then into the unmistakable sound of something large crashing through the underbrush behind her. Her heart pounded in her chest as adrenaline surged through her veins. She didn't dare look back, not yet. She focused on the path, praying it would lead her somewhere safe, somewhere with light and people and safety. But then the footsteps stopped. So did Lucy. The silence was even more terrifying than the sound of pursuit. She turned slowly, flashlight trembling in her grip, and swept the beam across the trees. Nothing. She let out a shaky laugh, relief washing over her like a wave. "I'm losing my mind," she muttered, lowering the flashlight. And then, from the corner of her eye, she saw them again, those eyes. But now there were more of them. Dozens? No, hundreds. Glinting from the shadows, circling her like predators closing in on prey. Her voice caught in her throat as she staggered backward, the flashlight trembling in her hands. She screamed, the sound tearing through the night as one pair of eyes lunged forward. The beam of light caught it midair, a grotesque creature, its face human-like but twisted beyond recognition. Its skin was stretched taut over an impossibly wide mouth lined with needle-sharp teeth, and its elongated fingers ended in claws that gleamed like polished obsidian. Lucy turned and bolted, the flashlight slipping from her grip and plunging her into complete darkness. The creatures howled in unison, the cacophony filling the air as they gave chase. She ran blindly, branches whipping at her face and tearing at her clothes. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed in protest, but she didn't dare stop. Somewhere, somehow, she stumbled onto a clearing. The moonlight bathed the space in an eerie glow, revealing a dilapidated cabin in the center. Its windows were shattered, its door hanging off its hinges, but it was shelter. Without thinking, Lucy sprinted toward it, slamming the door shut behind her. The creature's howls ceased. For a moment, the silence returned, and Lucy collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. But then, she noticed something. The cabin wasn't empty. The air inside was thick, stifling, and the faint stench of decay hung in the air. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness, and that's when she saw it. Eyes shining in the shadows of the cabin. Not just one pair, many. A slow, deliberate voice whispered from the darkness, low and guttural. "You didn't think you'd get away, did you?" The cabin door creaked open behind her, and cold air flooded the room. Lucy's stomach dropped as she turned to see dozens of eyes now outside the cabin, all staring in. And then she realized. The eyes inside weren't watching her. They were watching them. The glowing eyes in the shadows began to move closer, their bodies still obscured. And with a sickening crunch, a long, spindly arm reached out from the darkness and pulled Lucy into the void. The next morning, hikers found her flashlight lying on the forest path, its bulb shattered. But no trace of Lucy was ever found, only claw marks carved deep into the trees, and the faint glint of two eyes that seemed to follow them as they fled. The rain pounded against the windows of Sarah's small apartment, each droplet sounding like a fingernail tapping insistently on the glass. She was alone tonight, surrounded by the quiet hum of her dimly lit living room. Her laptop glowed faintly on the coffee table as she typed away, lost in work, when the sharp, piercing trill of her phone shattered the silence. Startled, she grabbed the phone off the table. The screen was blank, no caller ID, just the word, unknown. She hesitated for a moment, her thumb hovering over the green button. The rain hammered harder as if urging her to answer. Against her better judgment, she accepted the call. "Hello?" she said cautiously. No response. All she could hear was faint static, like a whisper carried over a broken connection. Then, just before she hung up, there was a sound, soft, deliberate breathing. She slammed the phone down, her heart pounding in her chest. Shaking it off, she muttered, "Probably just a prank call." The rain didn't let up, and neither did the uneasy feeling crawling under her skin. She tried to focus on her work, but her phone rang again. The same number, unknown. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. "Who is this?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. Again static, but this time it wasn't just breathing. A faint voice murmured something indecipherable, words like shadows slipping through her grasp. "What do you want?" she shouted. The call disconnected with a harsh click. Sarah stared at her phone, her reflection distorted in the screen's black surface. She set it down, but even as she tried to ignore it, the phone rang again, and again, and again. Each time she answered, the voice grew clearer, closer. She swore she could hear her name. Her pulse raced, her throat dry. The voice had an edge to it now, a taunting, mocking tone like whoever or whatever. It was knew her. "Stop calling!" she screamed into the receiver, but the reply froze her blood. "I'm already here." Her eyes darted to the windows, searching the darkness beyond the rain-streaked glass. Nothing. She bolted from the couch, checking the door. Locked. She paced the room, adrenaline pumping through her veins. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a call. It was a text. "Answer the door." Her breath hitched. Slowly, her gaze shifted to the front door. The peephole was dark, nothing visible through the tiny circle of glass. Her hands trembled as she backed away. Another text buzzed. "Don't make me knock." The moment she read it, there was a deafening bang on the door. She let out a scream, her back hitting the wall as she stared at the vibrating door handle. The phone rang again. This time it didn't stop. The shrill, endless ringing echoed in the small apartment. She covered her ears, trying to block out the sound, but it was inside her head now, drilling into her skull. The banging stopped, the ringing stopped, and then silence. Sarah let out a shaky breath, daring to hope it was over. She inched toward the door, holding her breath as she peered through the peephole. Nothing. Her phone buzzed again, the sound making her flinch. She glanced at the screen, her heart dropping to her stomach. It was a photo of her, standing at the peephole. The phone slipped from her hand as she stumbled back. The photo wasn't just of her, it was of her right now. She could see her wide, terrified eyes, the way her trembling hand clutched the edge of the wall. A chill ran down her spine as a shadow passed over the image. It wasn't her shadow. She turned slowly, every nerve in her body screaming to run, but her legs were frozen. Behind her, the dim light of the room flickered, revealing a figure standing in the corner. Its face was wrong, too smooth, like skin stretched over a featureless skull. Where its eyes should have been, there were only deep, empty sockets. And yet, it was staring at her, its head cocked unnaturally to one side. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't dare look, but the message read, "Don't turn around." The thing lunged, the room filled with her scream, and then silence. The next morning, the landlord let himself into Sarah's apartment after receiving complaints about the noise. The place was empty. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no Sarah. But her phone lay on the floor, its screen cracked, still open to the text message app. The last message was simple. "You should have listened."